Hey everyone, hopefully everyone's having a great day. In this video, what we're going to go over is practical ways of boosting your productivity. And while we're getting to that point, we're also explaining the origins of where productivity originated from. So we hope you enjoy this video.
All right, I got a document for you guys.
Dope.
Cool. All right.
Productivity.
So we're talking about productivity today. So I'm going to get into first productivity and where it kind of came to be first. So the word productivity comes from the word productivus, and it comes from the Latin word meaning fit for production. So this is all going to relate. I'm not just giving like a history lesson on this stuff. But the meaning, the reason why it came up really was in the 1770s, and it was used as a model at the time because there was colonization going on. And it was used as a model for countries to acquire wealth through production and through output. So really what productivity is creating output. So an example of like Colombian coffee versus something like New Zealand sweet potatoes. This is an easy way to understand it. So in Colombia, we know that like the coffee there is really good, right? But if, for example, like they tried to produce sweet potatoes, they would not be as efficient, right? And their output would not be as much. So, and for New Zealand, I hear their sweet potatoes are really good. So if they tried to produce coffee, they're not going to do as good as a job as Colombia to produce coffee, right? So, but for both of them, the win-win there is if Colombia focuses on creating coffee and if New Zealand focuses on creating sweet potatoes. And when they trade, then each one of them produces more wealth for the country. So this productivity started when countries were trading with each other. And so, yeah, so if the United States focused on something that the United States was good at, then it would continue to grow, right? Just like kind of how China produced like a really big economy through like creating a lot of like cheap goods, like t-shirts, and I mean everything that you know of is like made in China. And for them, what they leverage is their raw materials. They're a big country with a lot of raw materials and a lot of workers. And that's how they were able to acquire wealth through their output. So this model for countries leaked into the industrial age for us, which kind of produced factory workers and then also the standardized school system. So we operate under the factory worker model right now. With the school system, it's still like a lot of us are still trying to understand like why are we learning like these subjects in particular, right? It's to produce like a certain worker for the United States so that it fuels the economy and it produces more output so that we acquire more wealth as the whole of the United States. So that's where productivity kind of stemmed from. So with that background, I'm gonna start talking about productivity on a personal level because this is the most like common type of productivity that we hear of is on the personal productivity, right? And it's more about generating output as an individual. Like how much output can you create as an individual, right? And there's two components to this, and it's the basis of biohacking. So biohacking is all about like hacking your mind, hacking your body in order to produce more output. In a way, it's like productivity, right? People who are into biohacking are generally into productivity as well. People who are into mindset training, stuff like that is also interested in personal productivity because those are the two components that we have, right? As an individual, we have our body and we have our mind, right, to produce things. So we either in the past, like when we're talking about the labor force, we're talking about like producing with our bodies, right? Nowadays, we are producing a lot more with our minds because we're talking about skill acquisition, we're talking about knowledge. Most of the things that we do are on the computer, right? So we're really using a lot of our mind instead of our bodies. So that's important to know in the modern day because a lot of the productivity that we've learned is kind of based off of the productivity of 9 to 5 and labor workers. So we have to be aware that things are changing in the modern day and how to adapt to be more efficient using the mind instead of the body. And the last thing to remember is that we're not machines. So the productivity was also created for kind of like a machine level, because in the industrial age, we're working with machines. We're working with like in factories, right? So we're thinking of things as like machines and how to like optimize the hours based on machines and everything. We're social animals. So one thing really important to know is the life expectancy of a human without social support is much shorter than one with good social support. So this is something that Destiny probably knows. Um, in like relationships, people who generally have more relationships at the end of their life generally live much longer than humans who don't. So that says something about productivity and like how much we can produce, based on like us humans. We're much more sprinters than we are like machines, which are consistent, right? Our brains work more of like in spikes rather than a consistent flow, like how a machine would, like how a computer would continue to like code or whatever. ChatGPT continues to do this. Like humans are more inspiration, creativity, things like that nature. We try to be like machines, but if we try to be like machines, then machines will always beat us because they have the advantage in that aspect. So the two components, one is, and here's some practical things to do. We're talking about the body first, right? So the body is a gateway to the mind, because what you do in the body affects the mind. So these are some of the things that I want to talk about when we're talking about producing more output via the mind, right? Because the body impacts that. So one thing is eye strain and headaches. I hear from a lot of people that I work with in the past when they've had this. Is a very simple fix actually. Through like headaches, is they have bad lighting. So if you have the computer, if you check your computer right now and the brightness setting is to the max, that's not good. That's going to give you eye strain and headaches much faster than someone who has a lower type of light coming in from the laptop. It also means that you probably have glare on your computer screen. So in Denmark, Denmark's considered one of the happiest countries in the world. And the students, what they do is they would, even if they're really like, they don't have money at all, they would have like a crappy bed area, they would have like crappy furniture, but they would invest into like a really expensive light. So I think that says something about the happiest place in the world, Denmark, and their really big focus on lighting. They always have good lighting, they're really productive people. Um, and this is just something I hear over and over again. If you have a window behind you, directly behind you, you're probably causing glare, you're probably causing eye strain, headaches, and that causes bad productivity, right? I think someone put a question in. All right. So the next thing is stress and anxiety. So here are like some biological responses and biohacking type of things. So when we're working with computers in the modern age, a lot of like the stuff that we're working with is close to our face. So in a biological sense, in a primitive sense, when you're looking at close objects for a long enough time, it causes anxiety. That's why when you look out a window at the distance for a while, you feel more calm. If you look at the sea, if you're out in the sea and you're looking out into the ocean, you feel more calm. If you're in a forest and you can peer really far away, you feel more calm. So the inverse happens when we're looking at computer screens, when we're looking at phone screens, because they're like so close to us and they cause that stress and anxiety without us even knowing it. So that's something to really take a note of and to really be aware of. The other aspects, which I don't think you guys have an issue for in Florida, is sunlight and vitamin D is more for me. And yeah, in the wintertime, there generally is more stress. People are more stressed. In New York, you see it all the time. People are more rude in the wintertime. They're more stressed. They're under more anxiety, right? They're not getting enough sunlight. They're not getting enough vitamin D. That's one of the aspects. And also the other aspects is they get lack of exercise because they're not going outside as well. They're not getting fresh air, things like that. So these sound very very basic, but they're not really practiced enough. They're not really being people aren't as aware of it. Eating healthy, that's another obvious one. When to eat and what to eat is important. So a lot of people who are focused on productivity, they do intermittent fasting, like they don't eat in the morning, right? Generally in our space, they don't eat in the morning, and in the afternoon, that meal is actually very important because that meal kind of determines how the rest of your day can go for the next couple of hours at least. If you're eating something unhealthy or like meat heavy, right? That can cause food coma, in the midday and cause you to crash, right? There's the whole like 2 p.m. crash that people talk about, right? That's one of the main reasons why people experience the 2 p.m. crash, because right after they have the lunch, they have more exhaustion, right? Their bodies are processing the food and they get food coma, right? And that leaks into the mental state. So, I'll talk about like what my practices are there and what has worked for me. One of the things that has worked for me is eating vegetarian food in the afternoon. That has helped a lot for sure. And then exhaustion, headaches, more headache stuff, more exhaustion stuff. A lot of it comes from dehydration, right? I remember Tony Robbins when I was in his date with Destiny, he said like, if you feel bad, drink a cup of water, drink a glass of water. Like that's one of his things in it. It's obvious, right? A lot of people are dehydrated. They're not drinking the amount of water that they need for their body. And also in the wintertime, when you're sleeping with the heat on, your body gets more dehydrated than normal. So you actually need to hydrate more in the wintertime, which people forget to do because in the summertime there's cues, right? Like you start to sweat and you're like, okay, I need to hydrate. But in the wintertime, you don't sweat as much, but you're more dry actually. So hydrating in the wintertime is very important for headaches and exhaustion. So next, we're going to talk about the mind. So last week we talked, I think it was last week. Yeah, last week, Destiny talked about, the vibrational levels, right? And you can kind of break this down into positivity and optimism. As you like go higher up in the scale, you're more positive and you're more optimistic about things, right? As you go lower in the scale, you get more negative and you get demotivated and you don't think things are very possible, right? So to be positive and optimistic in a practical way, um, one really important thing is to understand the cause of the negative emotions. And then the next step is to replace them or remove them. So understanding the cause, it's like, as a saying goes, it's the first step is consciousness, is to understand. And then the next step is really to take actions on how to replace or remove, right? Those are the main things. So the stress and anxieties, if you're looking at close objects for too long, right? Make sure you look out the window, you go for a walk. Depression, as I've learned from volunteering for a suicide hotline, a lot of it comes from isolation and not having a social life, right? And social media actually works inversely. So when you socialize on social media instead of actually in person with people, right, that actually causes depression. That causes disconnection. Um, because right after like those social interactions, like you constantly need more, right? After you have a social interaction and you get off the phone, you're like kind of isolated again, and you don't really have real connections there. So for depression, really, it's really down to isolation. So understanding that and making sure that you're utilizing socializing into your life so that it affects you mentally in a good way. And then lastly is enjoying work. So like if you're spending so much time on work of the work day, finding the old way is really to find the work that you love, but then it's not always that way, right? Like there's some people like they find work that they love, but then there's a lot of things that they don't love to do at work. So really a practical way is to find where you're the most useful in work, and that engages the mind, right? It uses the mind um where you have like the most advantage, kind of going back to the competitiveness of countries, right? If you're looking at a place um that produces like Colombia that produces coffee the best, they might not always be the most passionate about creating coffee, but that might be where they're most useful, right? So in a personal level, finding where that most usefulness for you is, that increases your mind capacity and also your productivity levels. Find areas that energize you as well. So those are two areas to look for instead of just looking for things that you love to do, right? Because I mean, I don't think everyone loves to look at like data or like everyone loves to do certain things like menial tasks, right? And then find areas that energize you and implement that throughout your day. So if you know that there's work that energizes you and you can strategically place that in times of the day when you feel less energetic. So in the beginning of the day, maybe you feel more energetic and you can do a lot of the hard tasks. But in the midday, you might get a little bit of a slump. You might go to the areas that energize you in order to, do those effectively. Okay. So the 9 to 5. So let's talk about this. This comes from the labor days, right? So there was actually a 4 hour day work experiment. And out of like the 61 companies that participated, and here's a link if you guys are curious. Um, 56%, I mean, 56 of the 61 companies are continue with the 4 day work week, saying that's a permanent change because some of the benefits in these hours were found in the well-being. So before and after shows that 39% of employees were less stressed, 75% had reduced levels of burnout at the end of the trial. So likewise, levels of anxiety, fatigue, and sleep issues are decreased, while mental and physical health both improve. So when we're talking about companies producing output for companies producing like great work, um, just understand that like this goes back to like the theory of sprints rather than long-term drawn out stuff. So like a 9 to 5 workday, if you think about it in terms of a consistent like all the way you're like working all the way through, it's very draining. So if you think about it in terms of sprints, even with your tasks, right, you'll be a lot more productive. So this is what works for me. And I'm not going to say that it works for everybody, but this is just something I'm sharing with my schedule. So schedules I found only work if they're followed, right? So if you're talking about Pomodoros, right, and this is something that I've experimented for a long time, Pomodoros, other types of little hacks for productivity, they generally don't last long because people stop doing them. And in order to have real productivity, you need something that integrates into your life and you continue to do every single day, right? So this is something that you have to integrate into your lifestyle, right? So in the morning, that's when you have the maximum mind energy, right? So big creative tasks, big rock type of stuff, you're like tackling those, right? Hydrating is very, very important in the morning, as I mentioned. After 8 hours of sleep, your body's definitely dehydrated. So make sure to utilize your mind energy. Generally, people have about 3 to 4 hours of mind energy. This goes back to this 4 hour day type of experiment thing. So generally people have around that much. That's why those companies are proposing that much, right? And then the midday, that's when you have your maximum body energy. As Eric probably knows, when you work out in the midday, you have more muscle capacity than you do in the morning. If you work on the morning, you can actually lift less, right? If you work out midday or night, your body actually has more energy. So using this, you can use this as a hack. Use the body to recoup the mental energy, right? Because that's a connection to the mind. So you can do walks, you can do exercise. As I mentioned before, vegetarian food if possible, right? That definitely works for me. And like not giving me food coma and allowing me to like keep going on. Optimization tasks, work that like energizes me, reiterating that again. And then socializing. Socializing can be a way of like brainstorming as well with the team, things like that. And then learning. That's kind of like what I do midday in order to stay productive, right? Because if you're trying to tackle like really big tasks after the midday when your mind energy is really kind of depleted after the morning, it's kind of going to work against you. So be sure to like strategically place the things that um, where you can do your best work, right? And if there is a big task that looks big to somebody else, but it's work that energizes you, remember that that's also something that might look like big to other people, but for you, it's like something that drives you. So that's something you can do midday after as well. So unlocking productivity on a team level. So a lot of what we've been talking about is personal productivity. So like it's like a individual basis, right? But it doesn't. We don't really. Uh, I mean, a lot of biohacking and productivity doesn't really focus on things that happen on a team level, right? And on a team level, it's quite important because instead of creating a one-to-one output, you create like a 1 to 3 or a 1 to 4 output, right? Generally, if you have a good team, you produce more, and it goes back to that trading, right? It goes back to that initial topic that I talked about right here. Let me go back about here, where it's like if you use countries who can acquire wealth better, like Colombian coffee and New Zealand sweet potatoes, if you merge them together and you do trade, then each one wins more. So when it comes to team productivity, it's a synergy of minds, right? Because we're not doing a synergy of bodies, right? It's not like basketball where we're like trying to synergize in that way. We're trying to synergize in a mental way, right? So just like different countries with different specializations, each member brings their unique trade insights to the table. So that means if we specialize in certain things, we bring unique insights, deep insights to the table that the other person might not know. So for the sweet spot here, through experimenting, what people have found is for problem solving and ideas, 3 members is good for that type of productivity because 2 people are not talking to one another, and 3 people is small enough where the ideas and the feedback loops is like really tight, and that you're getting things done. So like um, people like writer rooms, directors, people in the creative fields do this in order to problem solve. They have like 3 members. For critical feedback, it's a little bit different because you're just looking for feedback on like work or things like that. And this falls more on like the 4 to 6 members. So this was something that Agora used for a long time, where they did feedback circles with 4 to 6 members, right? And they were very efficient this way. As you go higher, and the reason why those big, really, really big companies have issues being productive and they lose a lot of productivity as they grow is because they have too many members, too many people talking, and nothing really gets done, right? It's almost like politics at that point. So it's important to understand, like in a team dynamic, like the goal you're trying to solve, and also like the sweet spot for it. And so I think this might be the last one. Evolution of productivity. Understand that productivity basically means output, and high output in an industry equals eventual commodity. So when we're looking at industries and that allow us to do high output, like when we're talking about AI, right, which is the most prevalent right now, it becomes the eventual commodity. It's not a commodity today, but it eventually becomes a commodity, just like with the invention of industrial places like the chainsaw, right? That's like it was like awesome at the time, right? But then it becomes a commodity. And something that's more relevant for us today is the evolution of YouTube. In the beginning of YouTube, you see a lot of like content creators creating on their bedrooms, right? Creating content out of their bedrooms, and then those are like the people, and then now they're all gone, like those people, because it became a commodity to shoot videos from your bedroom, right? And eventually, the winners are the ones who have really good content, like super high quality information, high quality production. You know, if you look at any of CoffeeZilla's type of content, it's almost like a Netflix series, right? So the same thing happens in movies, right? If you look at old time movies, when they were less, you know, as they became more commoditized, the ones that stand out with the really like in-depth type of really awesome made movies. And then for college degrees, you know, once upon a time, college degrees was a huge thing. Um, and it was awesome for like person to even have a college degree. Now that everyone has college degrees, companies don't see it as a commodity. So that's a form of output, right? That kind of output created a lot of people, and then it created a commodity. So this is something to be aware of when you're talking about team productivity, when you're talking about personal productivity, that we're not just trying to create more output, right? We're trying to create quality output in order to stand out, in our fields, personally with our skill sets, or like even with our businesses, whatever it is. We want to make sure that we're producing quality output, and that quality output really goes back to that personal productivity level of making sure that you're not doing just output, because if you're midday and you're just creating output, that's not really the most quality output. So really the quality output comes from that maximum mind energy. So yeah, I think that's what I have to say on productivity.
Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please give us a like. And also, if you have any questions or comments, please drop them in the comment box so we can help answer. And for any future videos that you guys would like to see from us, please provide it within the comment box as well so we can go ahead and prioritize certain videos you guys would like to see in the future. So thanks for watching again, and hopefully everyone has a great day.